Welcome to Almost Professionally Photoshopped. Today we're going to look at, does this dragon bite? Let's find out. So let's break down this picture and look at what it has going on with the scene. Now first I go ahead and look at all these layers of the text and I put them in their own group. So let's take a look at this file. And I think there's really some interesting things going on here. We have this cool looking mythical dragon. We've got the words in kind of some ancient languages and the stories. The idea of this fantasy, you're reading this book and this book is just enthralling about all the things that can happen. And I think we can do some things to improve this and make it even stronger. So first off, we got our different text layers. And in here we've got the different layers. Now, each one of these, I don't have the font on my computer. The student actually had the font on their computer. And when I edit them, if I go ahead and click one, it'll give me this warning message, replace the font. And I hit, sure, okay, yes, I don't have this font. I can't find this font. Once I hit replace, it will give me a substitute. So now the font doesn't look the same. So if I want to edit the font and I don't have the font, now it looks bad. I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to recommend you do, and what I'm going to do here, if you have this problem and you want to keep that font, you can't make changes to it though, select the fonts, right-click on here and go to rasterize type. That'll make it so now it's pixel-based type. It's not a vector anymore. I can't edit it. I can't change the words from that file, from that layer. But I now have them individually done. So here, what I'm going to recommend we do is in some of these, we soften them a little bit or maybe change some of the opacity. So they're not all the same sharpness, all not the same hardness. So I'm going to go ahead and do that to a few of these. The ones that are closer, they're probably going to be bigger and sharper. Ones that are further away, we could probably soften them a little bit. Maybe turn back the opacity, sure. Or maybe come up to our blur and give them just a couple pixels. A pixel might be even too much. That actually softens quite a bit. It might be a bit much. Maybe 0.5 pixels. Just soften them just a little bit. Some of the distant ones, like drag in the background here, same thing, soften. If I go to filter, the last tool I did, Gaussian blur is already there. Just to start softening some of them, maybe that Chinese symbol, just a little bit. Just slowly softening some of that. So changing some of the opacities, I think, is a big deal for what we're going to do here. This one can maybe make it a little more intense. Not quite 100% because we want some see-throughness, but I think changing some of these brightness and darkness factors does help kind of control the emphasis. Now what do we see here? We have a dark dragon surrounded by some brighter objects. The tree in the background is much brighter. The dragon isn't as emphasized as much because I'm drawn to some of the bright sections of the tree, which I don't think is where we want them to be, and not the dragon. So to do that, we do two different things. We can darken the background a little bit, and we can go ahead and brighten the dragon. So I'm going to go ahead and look at my background here, and I'm going to do this by a couple different ways. I'm going to unlock it by pressing the lock key. Now it's unlocked so I can make edits. And I'm going to go ahead and soften the background. Now there's a couple different ways I can do this. I can just soften it and make permanent damage to the pixels. I don't want to do that. I want to right click on here on the right side of the layer, not the left side. Go to Convert to Smart Object. Creates this little smart object sign. Smart object signs are great. They're important. I've got a smart object. Now I can start to just soften after I add a filter a little more gradually. So I'm going to go to filter. I'm going to go to blur. I'm going to do more than like the 1 pixel, maybe like 3 pixels. Okay, that may have been a little bit much. Let's do like 1.5 pixels. Okay, maybe 1. 1 pixel. We can always adjust it later. That's just softening the trees a little bit. Automatically, that puts more emphasis on the dragon because now the dragon is sharper. The dragon stands out. We're attracted to brighter objects, more colorful objects, which there's some color in the dragon. We're attracted to sharper objects. And if we don't have those things working for us, a compositional technique is to change them. And we can do that in Photoshop because of the layer. So I've done that, darkening that, just soften a little bit, which I think is a good thing. If I wanted, I could also probably darken the trees. So I'm going to take here a layer, and I'm going to go to Levels, and I'm going to just darken the trees a little bit. Some layer, oh, that looks nasty. Okay, that's fine. Darken a little bit, just a little bit like that. Helps darken the trees a little bit. If I want, I'm going to do a little more advanced technique. I'm going to darken a lot here for now. Then I'm going to take this mask on level 3, and I'm going to paint with a brush. So I paint black on the trees that I don't want that dark. I have a 62 opacity brush, so I'm not going to bring back everything in the darkness. But what this is doing is I'll leave the parts that are in the trees. So the trees are going to get darker more proportionally, the kind of the bright sun behind the trees, than the other portions. And I think that's a big deal to help in there. Good. Those changes make a difference. Now we're going to look at kind of working from the bottom up. The shadow layer, I don't even see what it's doing. so far. I'm not sure what it's doing. I don't see much of a shadow at all. I think a shadow layer was a good thing. We see a shadow layer here. This one's going to let shadow behind the dragon. It's really not on the rock. So I think I'm going to, well, I'll keep that shadow there. Well, we'll just leave the shadow for now. I got my rock. Now it does appear that the rock looks nice underneath the dragon, but it does appear that the dragon's kind of floating on the rock, which isn't going to happen. He's going to have some shadow he's going to cast. He's not a Peter Pan dragon, as fantasy as he is. On my rock layer here, we've added the rock layer. I'm going to go ahead and create a new blank layer above it, and I'm going to go ahead and paint a shadow. I could do this through a clipping mask or adjustment layer. That's fine as well. In this case, I'm going to come up with my shadow. I have a 62% opacity brush. Make it fairly small because it's a small area. Where would the shadow be? The light's behind the dragon. It's going to be in the front of the rock. This will help to just kind of blend. And remember, the layers of the dragon are above it. So as I do this, it's not going to affect the dragon one iota. Just darken something like that, where this dragon is now casting a little bit of his body shadow. And we're going to see some of the wing has some shadow in there. Maybe casting his whole big large wing system in there. Help add a little bit of shadow to our dragon. Okay, good. I think that helps. Now, it might be a little bit intense right now, which it probably is. I'm going to go ahead and turn that opacity down so it's not quite as intense as I drew it originally. The opacity, blending mode's game changer when it comes to Photoshop. That looks pretty good. We see the wing even hitting above the rock. And breaking down our layers of the dragon. Okay, the dragon I think is pretty cut out. First, I'm going to turn off these layers that are above them, this book layer, just to keep it out of the sight for now. I think the dragon's pretty well cut out. Which is good. It's not perfect. Some of the belly, if I go ahead and zoom in on our dragon, she needs a little bit of edit here. I'm going to take my mask and I'm going to start to paint away parts of the dragon so it's a little sharper. Just a little bit. It's going to be a pretty hard surface because the dragon's pretty scaly. There's not a lot of fur or fluff to it like you would have with like Winnie the Pooh or something. And some back and forth painting black to hide portions of this. Looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Okay. And now I can start to pull this apart even further. Right now, our layer of the dragon has some different hue saturations. I don't know if I like that one. I think I like a little more bright saturations. We've turned down the brightness and the hue a little bit, but I think I like keeping brighter. If we want to change the hue, we can change the hue. We can make him look like a Smurf, or we can make him look green. We can make him look pink. Whatever we want to do, we have the control in our fingertips here. You make him look any color whatsoever. But I think more what we had in the blue color is fine. Go at our levels. It's definitely a bit dark there as well. I don't know if I like it that dark either. I'm going to turn that one off. Well, that's brightening the layer. Okay, that one is dark. That brightening the layer. I think that's a good choice. This one darkens the layer. So we're brightening and darkening. By brightening and darkening, all it's doing is on the same spot. We have one location, we brighten it, and then the next location, we darken it. We're going to add a lot of noise to the layer. We're going to create some quality loss. We're going to create more work for ourselves, and it's just all around not a good idea. So I'm going to go ahead and what I want to keep it brighter. So this one I'm going to go ahead and just destroy. Deleting that one now. This one's darker. Now I could probably come into this layer and go ahead and darken it up a little bit. Let me control those midtones a little bit darker. Controlling the tones darker or brighter. I think darker was a good thing. That's adding some darker tones to it. Now I'm going to show you a little more advanced technique here in a second. So once I darken it a little bit, I think that's a good thing. Darkening. Now I'm going to take this mask, and if there's light coming from the trees behind it, it's going to have light hitting the top of the dragon. We want to be able to keep some of the tones on the tip of the dragon where the light would actually become in real life. If we're thinking photographically to make it look real, we got to think of angles and all those kind of things. So I'm going to come up with a black brush, fairly small. I'm going to start to paint the tips of this dragon, the head, where the light would be falling, and creating maybe a little bit of reflection on the wing. And maybe a little bit larger for the wing. To be lit from that light behind. The wing might be slightly translucent too, I don't know. So we can maybe get a little bit of license there to kind of play with that wing. A little bit wings hitting here, and definitely on the scale. I have to go a little bit smaller because I don't want the dark portion of the feather like that. I'm going to create a little bit of lights falling on here. And maybe a little bit of light on this arm before her body covers the rest of it. Something like that. Now you can spend a lot of time. I'm not, just for the sake of video. Nobody really wants to watch all that. Nah, maybe someone does, but I doubt it. So, something like that. Now, if I go ahead and turn this layer on or off, it's subtle, but it's creating still some of the bright spots where it needs to be bright, but it's darkening the inner part of the dragon. Darkening this dark, menacing monster. So it's ready to, I don't know, protect its lair. Okay. Better. Now this one is darkening as well. We've already done a darken layer, so I don't know if I'm going to necessarily do that. So a darken layer on the dragon at some portion. If I want to come up and do a little more gradual brightening the layer. Now what I keep bright, remember, the mind will be more attracted to. So if I brighten it, even if it's a little more than I would naturally, that will attract a little more attention to the dragon where we want it to. And it will kind of guide the eye, tell us where we want to go. I'm using a soft brush. That helps just a little bit of darkening effect on there. I think that helps. Now, I think what we could do is we probably could brighten our dragon. Now, instead of completely masking over what I did, I'm going to go ahead and control-click on this area. I'm going to find my mask on my layer of my dragon, which right now I've cut the dragon out here. The student didn't actually mask it out. So I'm going to go ahead and control-click. By control-clicking, it selects everything for me. So it has the selection done. And then I can see part of what was originally there, they've masked some around the head and some of the other portions. So I'm going to take this mask right now, and I don't want to paint on the areas where there's no dragon. I'm going to use the intersect mask with selection. When I intersect the mask with selection, now it's just doing the mask area on top of the dragon. Now I'm going to go ahead and create a brightening curves. Maybe brighten up our curves a little bit, brighten up our dragon a little bit. Ooh, it's too much. That's still probably too much. I don't want to do very much. Maybe keep it darker in some portions, kind of creating the contrast a little bit. I think that's better. Just there. Now adding in other layers, coming this fog layer, which is good. We have it at a lighten, so it kind of blends with a different blending mode. The opacity is turned down a little bit there. I think that's a good thing. And that looks pretty good. Maybe a little bit less intense, so we can see a little more of the scenario. So if we want to make it less intense, I can just take my opacity, change it maybe just a little bit, maybe from 50-ish% instead of 69. That helps just a little bit more coming through. And then this book layer, this idea that's creating that we're reading a fantasy. This book is just a page turner. We can't put it down. And we've brought that piece into as well. So there, see a little bit of mask of the dragon, and we kind of see some floating here. We could soften this if we want, maybe drop it a pixel or two. In terms of the sharpness, but I think it looks pretty good. This is more salt and pepper to taste. Maybe I won't go quite as opaque. A little more faint, like 62 instead of 72%. So it's a little more kind of blended. And I think those effects, and maybe part of the fog layer there was to kind of help hide some of the fakeness of the dragon. The dragon doesn't look super realistic. So if we add more fog layer, that might not hurt. Or we can come in with our mask here. I'm going to go ahead and paint white to bring areas in here. Oh, that's a little bit too intense. So I'm going to come up with my opacity brush, turn it down just to like 25%. Make a nice large brush, and I'm going to start to paint in some of that fog. Here I'm actually clicking. Typically I don't click a lot, but it's going to just start to patch in some of that fog. I do a patch layer, then I'm going to go ahead and make it black again. Switch it to black, X, or flip the little arrow key, and start to paint back maybe where I want. I really want the head to be more obvious. Okay, great. maybe a little bit more on the wing, and I came back where I want. And I think those changes do make a pretty significant difference on the Dragon. I think they're subtle, but they help. So where are we at? What is before and after? That's before, and that's after. Pretty significant differences between before and after. It seemed maybe subtle all the time, but there's significant differences that put a little more emphasis on the Dragon and a little bit less on the surrounding areas. Not that they're gone. We still see the words. We still see the fantasy reading the book. But they're a little more about the Dragon, which is always cool, and a little bit less about some of the nuanced items in the piece. Thanks for watching Better Picks in just a few clicks. If you have any comments, please leave them below. If you would, help me out and hit the subscribe button. I'd appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.